told, forget it. There's no point in pursuing this. So yes, and Andrew just could operate with impunity, knowing that nothing would happen. And part of that is the deference that we still show to the royal family. There's no parliamentary scrutiny in terms of asking questions. They're not part of the Freedom of Information Act. Ambassadors clearly feel that they are Her Majesty's ambassador, and they therefore can't speak out of turn about what they've done. And pressure was put on people. So, for example,
It began with whispers, quiet, scandalous whispers that never quite disappeared. Whispers of a prince, a hotel suite, and nights that didn't belong to diplomacy. Now, more than a decade later, those whispers have turned into new accusations. Accusations that could deepen the shadow already hanging over one of the monarchy's most disgraced figures, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Once known as the Duke of York, a man trusted to represent Britain's interests abroad. Today, a name that carries the weight of disgrace, exile, and endless controversy. But this time, the allegations reach even further, into a taxpayer-funded mission, into the highest echelons of British diplomacy, and into the moral heart of what it means to serve the crown. Before we dive in, there's something I need to share with you. Over the past few days, thousands have watched these stories unfold, but most haven't subscribed. If you are one of them, I invite you now to join us. Subscribe to Crownverse so you never miss the next chapter in this unfolding royal history. Now, let's step back to the year 2010. When Prince Andrew was still flying across the world as the UK's special representative for international trade and investment. On paper, it was a serious role. His mission, to promote British business interests overseas, open doors for investors, and build relationships with powerful figures across continents. For nearly 10 years, he traveled tirelessly to Davos, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, Vietnam, Malaysia, and China, a global ambassador of British trade, funded by public money. The image was of a hard-working royal, the Queen's son helping the United Kingdom's economy grow. But behind the official smiles and handshakes, a darker story may have been unfolding. In October 2010, Andrew visited Hong Kong for what was meant to be a short, 4-day business trip. It came after engagements in Vietnam, Singapore, and Malaysia, and included meetings with the chief executive of HSBC, a dinner hosted by the powerful Jardine Matheson conglomerate, and visits to China Merchants Bank. The court circular confirms the trip, listing his engagements and his departure from London on October 17 and return on October 20. Everything seemed routine until, a decade later, a claim surfaced that during that very trip, Andrew allegedly turned his taxpayer-funded mission into something far more scandalous. According to royal biographer Andrew Loney, who has written extensively on the Duke of York, a source involved with the 2010 Hong Kong visit told him that the prince took the top floor of a hotel and had several Asian prostitutes brought in. This statement, which remains unverified, comes from an unnamed source, and no official evidence has yet proven it. But it's not the first time such accusations have surfaced. Loney says he was told the story directly from someone close to the organization of that trip. The picture he paints is not one of diplomacy, but of indulgence, a man at the height of privilege using a government-funded journey for private pleasure. To be clear, no government department or royal office has confirmed these allegations. The Department of Business and Trade, which oversees the successor to UKTI, declined to disclose where Andrew stayed during that Hong Kong trip. And no legal investigation has been launched into the claim. Still, the context matters. In Hong Kong, prostitution is legal under certain conditions, but organized prostitution, brothels, and public solicitation are not. The line between what's lawful and what's exploitative can be thin, and any involvement by a public official would raise immediate ethical and reputational questions. At the time, Andrew's official expenses were already under scrutiny. Reports later showed that his travel costs as Britain's trade envoy totaled around £4 million over 10 years. Flights, hotels, and expenses covered, at least in part, by taxpayer money. In 2011, a year after this alleged incident, one trip to Asia reportedly cost more than £90,000 in flights and accommodation alone. If true, the suggestion that such a trip might have doubled as a venue for private encounters, especially funded by the public, would be catastrophic. But the most damning aspect isn't just the alleged behavior, it's the pattern it suggests. The Hong Kong story echoes earlier claims about Andrew's conduct during another overseas visit. In a previous report, also unverified, Loney alleges that during a 2006 stay in Thailand, the prince had up to 40 women brought to his hotel suite over the span of 4 days. Again, these accounts are based on sources and have never been confirmed by any authority. But the repetition of similar claims fuels the image of a man who used his royal role as cover for private indulgence. Adding to that narrative are statements from Paul Page, a former royal protection officer who served at Buckingham Palace. In a documentary titled Prince Andrew Banished, Page claimed that Andrew had a different woman coming in every other day, and that palace security officers were often left uncomfortable by his behavior. These, too, are allegations, not proven facts. But Page's remarks came with detailed recollections. He described how Andrew once insulted a guard who refused entry to an unlisted guest, calling him a fat lardy-ass c. He said that within the palace, staff joked the prince's bedroom should have a revolving door. For the public, these stories fit a familiar pattern. A man shielded by wealth and status, a prince who seemed to view rules as suggestions. But if the allegations about the Hong Kong trip are true, and that remains unproven, they expose something deeper, a potential misuse of taxpayer money, a conflict between public duty and private indulgence. What makes it even more troubling is the timing. The trip occurred just months before the global financial scrutiny surrounding the royal family intensified. By 2011, questions about Andrew's friendships, particularly with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, began to dominate headlines. The Hong Kong story, viewed through hindsight, feels like a prelude to a larger fall, a glimpse of the same arrogance that would later destroy his public standing. When Loney repeated the allegations in interviews, he went further, describing Andrew as addicted to porn and to sex. That description is also unverified, based on Loney's interpretation of accounts he gathered from those who claimed to know the prince personally. Still, the description adds to the portrait of a man consumed by impulse and excess, a man whose public role blurred constantly with private vice. Even more alarming are the later connections that emerged between Andrew and figures linked to foreign influence. In 2020, reports surfaced that he had an unusual degree of trust with a Chinese businessman, Yang Tangbo, who was later banned from the UK over national security concerns. Court filings suggested that Tangbo attended the prince's birthday party and was allegedly told he could act on Andrew's behalf with potential investors.
The prince's office has since denied any wrongdoing, saying he cut ties with Tangbo on official advice and that they never discussed sensitive matters. But the overlap of money, politics, and personal ties continues to haunt his reputation. And so, every new claim, verified or not, stacks upon a tower of suspicion that's already near collapse. Those who once defended him now avoid his name. Officially, he no longer holds royal duties. His military titles are gone, his public role erased. But the scandals, the allegations, and the whispers refuse to fade. It's important to remember, no criminal charges have been brought against Andrew in connection with these new Hong Kong claims. The story, as it stands, relies on the words of one biographer and his sources. But the story has spread because it fits a pattern people already believe. That's the danger of reputation. Once it breaks, truth and rumor begin to sound the same. From the outside, it's easy to see this as another royal scandal. But inside, this kind of story cuts deeper. For King Charles, it's another blow to an already fragile monarchy. For the public, it's another reminder of how privilege and accountability rarely share the same room. The question many are asking now is simple. Who paid for that hotel suite? Government documents confirm that during his time as trade envoy, the funding for Andrew's trips often came from multiple sources. In some cases, UKTI covered accommodation and in-country expenses. In others, private travel was billed to taxpayers. The structure made it difficult to separate personal costs from official ones. If the allegations are true, again, that remains unverified, then the possibility exists that public money indirectly financed private misconduct. And that possibility alone is enough to fuel outrage. But there's also a broader issue at play: oversight. How could a royal representing the United Kingdom travel the world on public funds without the kind of scrutiny applied to ordinary officials? Investigative journalist David McClure, who studied royal finances in his book Royal Legacy, estimated that Andrew's total UKTI travel spending over 10 years reached about £4 million. That figure includes flights, security, and hotel stays, but not the potential costs of personal activities. When questioned about transparency, officials often responded that royal travel brings value to British trade, that the benefits outweigh the costs. But that justification depends on trust, and trust, in Andrew's case, has long evaporated. For those who knew him, this latest scandal feels almost inevitable. Once described as charming and confident, his charm turned to arrogance, his confidence became carelessness. He seemed to believe he was untouchable, a belief reinforced by decades of protection and privilege. That illusion shattered after the Epstein scandal. In 2019, his BBC Newsnight interview, meant to clear his name, did the opposite. His awkward denial of ever meeting Virginia Giuffre, his claim of not sweating, his insistence that staying with Epstein was the honorable thing to do, it all deepened public disgust. By early 2022, stripped of his titles and patronages, Andrew retreated from public life. His exile from royal duty was meant to close the chapter, but scandals like this Hong Kong story keep reopening it. For his defenders, it's unfair. Recycled gossip from old enemies. For critics, it's confirmation of a pattern. And for historians, it's another piece in the puzzle of how power shields itself until it can't. As with so many royal controversies, the truth may never be fully known. The alleged witnesses remain unnamed. The documents, if they exist, remain unseen. And the prince himself has offered no comment. But what's undeniable is the impact. Every new headline reinforces the image of a man who has squandered his second chances. Once a representative of the crown, now a cautionary tale. What began as a role designed to promote Britain's interests abroad may have ended up promoting something else entirely: the dangers of unchecked privilege. And yet, Even as these stories surface, the royal institution moves on. The king distances himself. Palace aides say little. The monarchy relies on silence to outlast scandal, and it usually does. But silence can't erase memory, especially not when those memories involve taxpayer money, power, and allegations of abuse. The real question isn't just whether Andrew did what he's accused of in Hong Kong. It's whether a system existed that allowed him to act without accountability. Because if that's true, if oversight was so weak that a royal envoy could turn an official trip into personal indulgence, then the scandal is bigger than one man. It's a story about power itself. For now, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor remains silent. The palace refuses to comment. The government avoids questions. And the public, once again, is left with a familiar sense of unease that when it comes to the royal family, some truths stay hidden because they have to. Still, time has a way of revealing what silence conceals. Maybe one day, the records of that 2010 trip will emerge. The receipts, the hotel logs, the names of those who were there. Maybe they'll confirm the story, or maybe they'll prove it false. Until then, the only certainty is uncertainty. The kind of uncertainty that keeps this story alive, that feeds speculation, and that reminds everyone watching that behind every polished royal smile lies a past still fighting to stay buried. And as history has shown, buried secrets have a way of coming back.